The worst part about it all was finding out that my 30-year-old wife of 2 years had been a covert sociopath, or nestling at the extreme end of the antisocial personality disorder spectrum, as the doctor would eventually tell me. But plenty of folk with that diagnosis are functioning and nonviolent members of society, so I honestly don't give a damn about the official psychiatric terminology or the long-winded and convoluted explanation accompanying it. Simple is best. Jade is evil. I don't know how she tricked me into believing, for most of our 3 years in a relationship, that she harbored the capacity for empathy or love. I've read about this, seen the documentaries. I know I'm not the first spouse to have been fooled by a killer partner for years on end. I just never imagined I'd be a news story. I survived, but my story might be triggering for anyone who's suffered marital abuse. This all began around Christmas. One lunchtime, I noticed it. No baby cucumbers in the fridge. I ended up with a rather beggarly and sorry-looking cheese sandwich, minus my favorite topping. I work from home, and it's the little things which bring joy to my day. But the lackluster sandwich wasn't what bothered me. I knew I'd gone food shopping the day before. I remembered buying a new bag of baby cucumbers. I remembered putting them in the fridge. I didn't remember having eaten them already. But I shrugged it off, nipped out to the shop, and bought another bag. I came home, put them in the fridge, then I logged the memory into my brain. There would be no disasters at lunchtime the following day. Well, when I opened the fridge to make myself a sandwich the following day, I frowned. No baby cucumbers. You've got to be having a fucking laugh, I said aloud to myself. This was bullshit. I knew with absolute conviction that I'd bought baby cucumbers. Maybe not the first time, but certainly the second time. I searched the cabinets, cupboards, drawers, refrigerator, and even the dustbin, for crying out loud, just to see whether Jade had perhaps thrown them away. I texted her. I swear I bought baby cukes last night, but they're already gone. You seen them or eaten them? Nope, you know I don't like cukes, kooky. Are you sure you bought more? Yeah, you remember me driving to the shop after work last night, don't you? Yes, you got us milk and bread, but no cucumbers. I did, but I've got to get back to work now, so I guess I'll just buy some more later. Then maybe I'll phone the GP because I feel like I've lost my bloody mind.
I was incredibly flustered when I returned to the shop to buy a third bag of baby cucumbers. Or the first bag, I considered. See, I did momentarily worry that I might be developing early-onset dementia like my late mother, as she imagined she'd done things when she hadn't. I came home, put bag number 3 next to the tub of margarine in the fridge, and stood there for a moment. I took a mental snapshot, storing that image for the memory bank. I let the neural film develop. The photo was in my noggin, clear as day. There was no denying it. A bag of baby cucumbers was sitting in the fridge. But the next day, at lunchtime, I found nothing next to the margarine tub. Everything else was in its exact place. The bag hadn't been moved to another shelf or drawer. It was just gone. Okay, now I know you're fucking with me. I angrily texted my wife. I bought another bag of baby cukes last night, and they're already gone. Please stop doing this, Jade. It isn't funny. I'm hurt that you'd insinuate such a thing. Yeah? Well, I checked this month's bank transactions online, and I see the multiple purchases I made at Aldi. The dates and costs add up. I've bought 3 bags of cucumbers this week. You've been caught. It was hilarious, but let's stop now because this is a waste of money, and I just want to enjoy my lunch, all right? Daniel, I didn't touch your cucumbers. I also stop off at Aldi on my way home nearly every night to get odd bits and bobs. It's a joint account.
You're just seeing the transactions I made at the shop this week. Do you think I'm dumb? Don't be annoying about this, Jade. I just want to enjoy my damn cucumbers, FFS. Please don't get angry, you're scaring me. What? I'm allowed to be angry if you start making me feel like a crazy person. But you know what? Sure, I'll go out and buy some more cucumbers, and we'll try this again tomorrow. Bag number 4. God, this is such a dumb argument. Never mind treating me like a crazy person. I was certifiable. I would have found the prank funnier if Jade had owned up to it and known when to call it quits. I wasn't really annoyed about the cucumbers. Well, okay, maybe a little. It was more about Jade's weird behavior. In retrospect, I suppose she'd been acting weird for a couple of months. Perhaps she'd been emotionally abusing me so skillfully that I'd hardly noticed. I mean, thinking about it, I had been depressed and stressed, but I blamed work at the time. Now I'm remembering all of the snappy comments, the cruel words draped in a helpful tone. There was more going on with us, but she had just seemed a little distant at the time. Bored, perhaps. All of this started because she was bored, and I had no idea how dangerous that would be for me. Driving more than a little over the speed limit, cartoonish ears puffing out plumes of steam, I tore into the Aldi car park. Then I marched inside the supermarket with my phone out to film the entire process. I recorded myself scanning the 4th bag of cucumbers at the self-checkout, marching past the slightly alarmed staff member, I don't blame her, driving home and shelving the baby cukes in the fridge. "There's your proof," I announced crossly before ending the recording. I sent the full video to Jade, and she replied, "That's great, Dan." I grumbled and mashed my phone keyboard. "Yeah, we'll see whether they're still there tomorrow." "Cool, I've got to get back to work." However, the following day, when I opened the fridge, I found, perhaps you've already guessed, the bag of cucumbers sitting in its rightful place beside the margarine. It hadn't disappeared this time. Of course it hadn't. Now I had the filmed proof on my phone. The "Dan's lost his mind" prank wouldn't work. Jade. This was definitely Jade's doing. I was enraged. I didn't even have a lackluster cheese sandwich that lunchtime. Didn't have the appetite. I barely got any work done either. My wife texted me later in the day. "Are you okay today, sweetie? I hope you're not still mad at me over the cuke misunderstanding. I'm coming home now. See you soon." "Okay." "What's up? Are the cucumbers missing again?" "No." "Oh, well that's great. Mystery solved. We need to talk when you get home. Sweetie, I had absolutely nothing to do with your cucumbers going walkies. I promise. We're going to have a talk." "Okay, but Steven and Ellie are coming over for dinner tonight, remember? So let's at least be pleasant with each other until they're gone." I agreed, but I was formulating a plan. And during that meal with our friends, I let everything out. I told Steven and Ellie exactly what Jade had done during the week, and then my darling wife burst into crocodile tears. She said I was upsetting her with these false accusations, and our two friends simply shared awkward looks. Ellie suggested there had to be another explanation for the missing cucumbers because Jade was clearly distraught, clearly not responsible. What really makes me feel queasy is remembering that as I watched my wife blubber, I was convinced. I actually started to believe Ellie's explanation. I apologized to Jade, and I didn't bring up the mystery of the missing cucumbers for the rest of the evening. Maybe I never would have brought it up again if the whole thing had stopped there. If I'd gone back to buying cucumbers and they'd stopped going walkies. "But why would you be so cruel?" Jade asked me. Something about her tone didn't sit well with me, and my rationality returned. "You're the cruel one, playing that trick on me this week and letting me lose my mind." I expected a fresh barrage of crocodile tears. expected Jade to keep up the pretense of innocence and perhaps continue making bags of cucumbers disappear from the fridge day after day, continue blaming my poor memory. Perhaps that would have been better than what actually happened. Jade readjusted her skin, as if it were a fleshy anorak 2 sizes too big for the body beneath. With a slight jiggle, she shook off the crying act and entirely regained her composure. Only it was a composure I'd never seen before. Gone was Jade. She was a hollow thing, watching me with only the trace of an after-image left in those once blue eyes. The same eyes physically, but no longer tenanted by a soul. I don't know what I was seeing, but it terrified me. Did you see Stephen and Ellie? Did you see how easily they ate up my version of events? My stomach sank. There it was, the admission of guilt. People will always believe me over you, sweetie, leasing that term of endearment with a tone of hatred. And it isn't a guy-girl thing. It comes down to your personality defects. Look at what happened tonight. With a few tears, I became the damsel in distress, and you became the beast. It really was that simple, and I wonder how easy it might be to truly make a monster of you, to paint a picture of an insane husband to our friends and family, to make you doubt yourself and lose your mind. How do I explain the horridness of realizing that I'd been in love with a lie for 3 years, that the person before me was never real, that I was successfully duped for such an absurd length of time? Obviously, at this point, the situation still seemed absurd. I'd been gaslit into believing my baby cucumbers had gone missing. But the absurdity of it all was, I think, by decision. Jade chose something trivial and trite, something silly to complain about. Admittedly, I had felt rather hot in the cheeks when I told Ellie and Stephen about it all. Why? I choked out. I love you. Why did you make our friends think I'd gone crazy?
Jade frowned. I was only trying to have some fun with you this week, Dan. And what did you do? You said horrible things about me to our friends. That was hurtful, so I'm going to show you how it feels to have people think terribly of you. What does that mean? I asked. Jade shrugged me off at that point and went up to bed. I slept on the sofa that evening, though for no more than 3 hours at most. I tossed and turned on the cushions, tossed and turned our relationship in my thoughts, replayed those 3 years over and over, trying to build up a picture of Jade. She had never spoken words so cutting and malignant before. Am I overreacting? I wondered. Maybe on the surface, maybe to a divorce lawyer. I'd like to separate from my wife because she hid my baby cucumbers as a practical joke. So dumb. This is all so dumb. But it wasn't about that. It was about Jade's new demeanor. It was about her confession. She wanted our friends and family to think I'd gone insane. This was all just a heated argument, said the devil's advocate in my head. Hardly grounds for divorce. Maybe Jade will apologize tomorrow. Maybe she'll say she didn't mean any of it, and your marriage will go back to normal. After all, this wasn't about my own bias. My friends and family had never pointed out anything wrong with Jade. They had at one point expressed concerns about me marrying a woman I'd only known for 1 year, but that was all. The cucumbers didn't go missing over the next couple of weeks, but my relationship with Jade became frostier by the day, and my mother sent me some strange messages. "It'll all be okay, Danny," she texted. "Just remember to speak kindly to Jade, okay? That's the key to a long and happy marriage." "What the hell did you tell my mom?" I asked my wife, feeling fresh rage bubbling up inside me. She gave no response, though I was sure a slight smile tickled her lips, and that only made me madder, only gave her more of the insane Dan she wanted, I suppose. We spent a couple of days with our respective families at Christmas, and my wife promised to give me time to think. She acted as if this were entirely gracious on her part. She was so calm and collected that I started to believe I'd imagined the whole argument, the whole cucumber mystery, the awkwardness with Ellie and Stephen, the chastising text from my mother. Jade was good at that, manipulating me. No wonder my sense of sanity was already unraveling. 2 days later, I drove home and readied myself to tell Jade we needed to go our separate ways. I remember my mother tried to call me twice on the drive back, and she left another strange message. "I'm disappointed in you, Danny."
I was going to ring her as soon as I got home, but that thought fluttered away when I spotted Ellie's red Fiat in the driveway. Head feeling light and airy, and suitcase trailing behind me, I entered my house to find Ellie and Stephen sitting in the living room with Jade. I'd barely put down my things before Jade revealed this was an intervention. She had told our friends I'd been drinking heavily over the past year, hence my outburst at our last dinner party. "And now, here you are, having driven home drunk," she said, nodding at the water flask in my hand, "putting yourself and others in danger." I refuted this, of course, so Jade suggested a test with her breathalyzer. I was so smug when I took it, but I should have focused more on that knowing look in her eyes. The result came in, nearly 0.14% BAC. I was over the legal drinking limit. Impossible, I thought. The only thing I'd drunk that morning was the remainder of my flask of cola in the car. I looked at the flask. I looked at Jade. Her eyes said it all. Stupid. I was stupid. My wife was always commenting on my gross, no arguing there, habit of not emptying out my flask often enough. My habit of drinking stale cola that had been sitting in the center console of the car for a few days. I joked about it with Jade the Christmas prior. I had stayed at my parents' house for 2 days, returned to my car, and finished off the flat soft drink I'd left sitting in the cup holder. My wife had made an educated guess that I would do the same disgusting thing the following Christmas. And she'd been right. I'd drunk half the cola on the way to my parents' house, and the other half on the way back. I'd felt a little lightheaded after both journeys, but assumed that to be the result of an emotionally taxing month with Jade. I hadn't even noticed. The cola always tastes a little funny after a couple of days, so I thought nothing of it. It disguised the liquor well. "You spiked it," I said, hand shaking as I looked at the flask in my hand. "You spiked my Coke before I drove home to see my parents, didn't you?" "Dan," started Stephen, "come on, it's okay. We want to help you." "No, you come on. You've known me for 2 years," I said. "Have you ever seen any evidence of alcoholism?" "I'm sorry, but I've known Jade for longer and I believe her." "Spiking your drink? That's batshit crazy. She wouldn't ever do a thing like that. I think you're a nice guy when you're sober, but Jade's told us all about what you're like drunk. And we need to get you professional help, Dan." I looked to Stephen for help, but he looked at me sheepishly and shrugged. It was Jade who unsettled me the greatly. She wasn't even breaking a sweat as she danced Ellie and Stephen like puppets on strings, as if manipulating were as mindless to her as breathing. "This is all a mix-up," I protested. "I thought it was just a Coke, honestly. I wouldn't ever intentionally drink and drive. I know you've only known me a couple of years, but you know I'm responsible." "I don't know," Ellie sighed. "You and Jade have both seemed different this year." "Work's been stressful," I said, uncertainly, and I'm sure my tone didn't help my cause.
I was realizing that Jade and not work had perhaps always been the problem. "He doesn't seem too drunk," commented Stephen. "He was only a little over the limit, right?" Jade narrowed her eyes ever so slightly, as if on the verge of turning against Ellie's boyfriend too, but she kept herself together and maintained her fragile act. "Well, I suppose Dan does seem okay tonight, doesn't he? Maybe it's all in my head." Ellie reached across the table and took her friend's hand. "It's okay, Jade." "Why would I even start drinking heavily?" I asked, feeling the rage swell within me once more. Fuck being calm. You know what? Maybe it's not work. Maybe it's my wife, who underwent a drastic personality shift because I didn't find her baby cucumber prank funny. Jade answered with a theatrical wail, which worked a treat at earning a consoling look from Ellie. At that point, I was done. "I've spent the last 2 days crying, Jade. Crying because you and me, we're over. I'll book an Uber to my parents tonight and come back to collect my things tomorrow morning." Surprisingly, Stephen followed me out to the hallway. "I'll, wait with you outside," he said, slipping his own shoes on. I shrugged but didn't contest and let Ellie's boyfriend follow me out to the driveway, where we stood in the cold and shuffled from foot to foot. "When you said Jade has had a personality shift," Stephen started. Then he shook his head. "Never mind." I turned to look at him. "Go on." "Well, he began. "There were some weird moments when I started dating Ellie. This was about a year before you came along. Jade was very protective of her friend. She didn't like me. Honestly, I thought I'd just been imagining it for years. But now you've made me realize I should have said something sooner. I just don't want to lose Ellie, you know? Anyway, I brought it up once. I told Ellie that Jade gave me the creeps, and Ellie naively joked about it with Jade. That was when the mask came off. Once Jade and I were on our own, she told me to be careful. Just 2 words, but those eyes, that voice, she was..."
"Cold," I finished. Stephen nodded. "Yeah, cold. And I realized she didn't care about protecting Ellie. She just didn't like me. Sensed that I could see through her, maybe." "So you believe me?" I asked. "I do," he said. "You barely drink anything at our hangouts. You're not an alcoholic." My phone buzzed, but it wasn't the Uber. "If you ever get behind the wheel drunk again, your father and I will call the police. For your own safety. Do you understand?" "I guess Jade told my mum the tall tale," I grumbled. "Guess I should stay at a hotel instead tonight." Stephen shook his head. "This isn't right, Dan. We need to sort this out with Jade. She's telling lies about you to the people you love." As if responding to that, "You two can wait inside, you know," called Jade from the open front door. Stephen eyed me uncertainly, but I nodded, and the 2 of us headed up the front path, headed into the dark hallway where my wife waited. I closed and locked the front door behind us. That was when it happened. It was swift. Or maybe not, if you consider Jade had been building up to this. There had been signs, and only Stephen had spotted them. And less than a minute after he'd finally plucked up the courage to share that with me outside, he was flat on his front, face down, lying in our front hallway, bleeding from his neck. Jade had slashed his throat with a kitchen knife. I stood there, mouth agape, and insides alight with a primal kind of terror. I'd never seen so much blood, never even seen violence beyond playground fights at school, and this was so different to that. There was a finality to it. Stephen clawed failingly at his throat with hands that quickly became motionless. I was paralyzed in the shadows of the unlit front hallway, paralyzed and unthinking, barely even taking note of Ellie screaming in the doorway to the living room, barely taking note of Jade steadying the blood-stained blade in her fuzzy winter mittens, the reindeer-adorned mittens from TK Maxx. I loved those mittens, loved Jade in those mittens, presenting a picture of innocence, the perfect wife who I'd been hoping would soon become the perfect mother, sweet Jade in her sweet reindeer gloves. She had just murdered an innocent man in front of me.
She doesn't know what's happening in here, my dying brain pointed out. Jade's going to get away with this. You're going to die a monster in everyone's eyes. No one will remember you with love in their hearts. No, I thought. Jade will have messed up somewhere. There will be some evidence linking her to the killings, something she missed. "What's going on in there?" my neighbor called, banging on the locked front door. "Get help," I weakly replied, staggering forwards as Jade pulled back from me, bringing the knife with her. And then I reached out, maybe instinctively more than consciously, but I used the last of my strength to seize Jade's wrist. My life was oozing out of the knife wound in my lower torso, and I could feel my head becoming feathery and my legs buckling. Whatever power I had left, I used it to overpower my wife. I twisted her wrist sharply, and she yelped. The knife jumped from her hand and clattered to the floorboards. Before I knew it, my 6'3" form toppled onto her, and we collapsed against the stairs. I felt Jade struggle to push me off, but I was too heavy. "Hello?" Mrs. Wool said. She was on the phone. "Yes, it's about the disturbance I reported. I don't know." I recall little of the conversation after that. I remember Jade wriggling under the weight of my body, and then there was blackness. I awoke in a hospital, but not with wrists handcuffed to the bed rail as I would have imagined. The police explained to me that Ellie and I were lucky to be alive. Ellie corroborated my story, explaining that Jade had lost her mind and killed her boyfriend. She told them I was innocent. If she had died from her wounds, things may have gone differently. Stephen, however, was not so fortunate. I visited Ellie in hospital as I was discharged before her, and she was so apologetic. I told her not to blame herself because Jade fooled us both. "Stephen knew," Ellie said tearfully. "He never seemed quite sure around Jade, but he'd never say why, other than that one weird time. Be careful," she told him. I thought she had just been joking around. "It's my fault. This is all my fault." "It's not your fault. It's not either of our faults. It's Jade's fault. We just have to hope the justice system does its job now." My wife's trial is coming up soon. I'll file for divorce once the dust is settled. But the only thing Ellie and I care about right now is making sure Jade's locked away. Not for retribution, but for protection. We're terrified of her, even now as she sits in remand. She's behind bars, but we need to make sure she stays behind bars. We're so scared for that big day. How does Jade still wield so much power over us? How does she still make me feel insane? I guess she succeeded in a way. That was her goal, after all. She'll surely be imprisoned for life, but so will I. In my mind, I'll never be free of her. I'll forever be shackled by my fear of Jade's twisted tongue,
capable of making anyone believe anything.